The Far Cry universe has always been a mystery. Is there even one true timeline? Or are there multiple timelines? Or perhaps each game exists in its own dimension, as the developers claimed when Far Cry 6 was released. That same game cleverly connected all the previous entries, but in doing so, it only confused players further and sparked countless theories about what exactly happened and how these games are truly connected. In this video, we'll focus only on the parts that confuse players and break down the timelines in the simplest way possible. And since every timeline begins with Primal, we won't repeat that, but instead focus on what really matters. The same applies to Willis Huntley and Herc appearing in every game, as players already know this. Let's start with the main timeline. As you know, Far Cry 1 is the beginning of this timeline, but when does it take place? The game looks futuristic, and if you search online, you'll find no official date, only some fans speculating about 2025. And this is incorrect information that is circulated among fans, with no evidence to back it up, but thanks to my friend HFCR from the Far Cry 1 original Discord server, I found developer documents confirming it takes place around 2020, and it's a definitive proof of when the game takes place. But here's the twist. This isn't the Far Cry 1 of the main timeline, because back in 2021, Far Cry 2's director Clint Hawking revealed that Jack Carver is the Jackal after 10 years. However, this contradicts the setting of the original Far Cry, since the Jackal appears in Far Cry 2, which takes place in 2008. So how could they be the same person? Well, the original Far Cry has multiple versions, and the only one that makes sense in the main timeline is Far Cry Instincts. Interestingly, this was also the first game after Ubisoft gained full ownership of the franchise. This time they completely changed the ending, making things far more mysterious.
I think we can do better than that.
Fans speculated the box contained diamonds, the same currency used in Far Cry 2. So due to the PTSD that Jack suffered from after what he saw on this island, he used those diamonds and began trading in weapons. Over the next 10 years, he changed his name to the Jackal and settled in Africa to fund wars, where he became such a problem that an unknown organization sent the player to kill him, but instead the player cooperated with him. Eventually, he disappeared, never to be seen again. Casey Fixman confirmed this in Far Cry 5.
I heard of the Jackal, right? That arms dealer in Central Africa? Nobody knows what happened to him since his body was never found. I know. I wish I could tell you more, but the report won't be declassified until 2058.
And since Far Cry 2 takes place in 2008, and Jack became the Jackal in 10 years, this places Far Cry Instincts around 1998. So now we have the first two games in this timeline. This leads to Far Cry 3. Regardless of its plot, two important things happen. Voss doesn't die and escapes the island, because this is what the character's actor Michael Mando believes, as he said in an interview that he is still alive from what he understood. And I also explained in my theory, which you can watch it here. Also, the canonical ending is saving your friends and leaving the island. This is what Jason confirmed in the Survival Guide, a book he wrote after the events of the game, in which he explains how to survive if you are lost in a jungle or on an island full of people trying to kill you. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to write the book in the first place. And as we know, the events of this game happen in 2012. Then comes Far Cry 4, where near the end, after AJ kills Yuma, and before confronting Pagan, the Control DLC happened inside Pagan's mind, explaining what Pagan truly wished for Ajay, including his desire for him to be his son, what exactly happened between him and Ishwari, and why Yuma betrayed Pagan. But what about the ending of the game? Well, there's a comic called Rite of Passage, set before Far Cry 6. In its second issue, Anton tells Diego that Ajay killed Pagan, confirming it as the canon ending, and the game's story is set in 2014. And before we get to Far Cry 5, you should know that the events of Inside Eden's Gate take place right before the main game. It serves as a prologue that sets up the story and introduces the cult to players. And here comes Far Cry 5. It takes place in 2018, bringing with it a major problem: the nuclear bombs and the multiple endings. This is what led to the many issues that still confuse players today. What if I told you that none of these endings actually happened in this timeline? But how? Well, Far Cry 6 took place in 2021, which means the main timeline wasn't destroyed, and the nukes or the World War in Far Cry 5 never actually happened. That would have led to the cult expanding greatly in America, as we see in the secret ending where the cult symbol appears on the American flag, and during the Seeds of Love mission, you will find a character named Riel Lorenzo, who essentially serves as an equivalent to Faith Seed in Far Cry 6. She is clearly inspired by her, even mimicking her moves and dance. She even uses bliss flowers, planting them, maybe to persuade people to join the cult, to the point that some fans believe she might actually be the old Faith before the one we know. But since the cult expanded beyond the borders of America, it seems they started recruiting more versions of Faith to persuade people to join, and the cult even supports these Faith versions, as a letter in the same mission shows that the cult sent her these flowers to plant. It also shows that the cult trades in these flowers and invites more people to join them. But the cult is not that peaceful here. When you rescue Boomer, there's a letter mentioning that Herc paid gold to have him smuggled. This hints that the cult's crimes still happen, but secretly, unlike in Far Cry 5 where they were public and Joseph has not been arrested or investigated yet, it's still unknown what will happen to Joseph and his siblings here. Perhaps in the future, someone will expose them and launch an investigation leading to events similar to Far Cry 5, but this time involving a full army, not just 5 people like before, since back then the world was in a world war. Perhaps it will end with Joseph's siblings surviving and choosing to disappear, or even joining the war and ultimately meeting their end. As for Joseph, he might be killed, vanish entirely due to his greater significance, or perhaps be captured and interrogated. However, in Issue 3 of Rite of Passage, when Diego asked Anton if Joseph's faith had failed him and his world had burned, Anton replied that it was Joseph who failed his faith, which hints that he is still alive. And this aligns perfectly with what we mentioned earlier. This leads to 2021, where Far Cry 6 takes place. Anton dies, Yara is liberated, Voss is still alive and working with Juan, and his remembrance of his painful past shown in the Insanity DLC, which also showed that the cult has existed for a long time.
Why do we do the same things over and over, thinking the result will suddenly be different? That, my children, is the very definition of insanity.
So in this main timeline, we now have 3 dead villains and 3 still alive. Now let's move on to the second dimension, the Nuke Timeline. All the events in the main timeline happen until Far Cry 4. Remember the Control DLC? Pagan mentioned he hid nukes under the palace aimed at Montana.
I was starting to get a little tired of America meddling in my personal affairs without consequence. I mean, closing trade, sending the CIA, trying to hire you to off me or something. It really pissed me off. So, beneath this palace is an enormous fucking vault of nuclear weapons, a fuck ton of them, pointed right at America. Probably somewhere near Montana, to be exact.
But what happened? During Far Cry 5 on the radio, you hear about terrorism and wars breaking out globally, ending all chances of peace. For me, I don't think Ajay is responsible, but rather Amita or Sabal, since Ajay never wanted to rule, but only to help the Golden Path.
I owe Golden Path for rescuing me, but honestly, I'm just here to scatter my mother's ashes.
I don't think he would tell them about this secret, but I believe they discovered it themselves. With global tensions escalating during Far Cry 5, either of them activated the nukes we see in the Resistance ending, destroying the world and leading to New Dawn. During Joseph's time in the bunker, the Collapse DLC happens inside his mind, showing important details, including that Joseph's death is the canonical ending in New Dawn. As in the Book of Joseph mission, he finds his body under the tree. It also shows what would happen if his siblings had survived, where Jacob ends up killing him. In this timeline, Far Cry 6 never happened, and we don't know what happened to its characters, or even Anton Castillo, but Anton would eventually die anyway, since the Viviro treatment for his leukemia had stopped working.
I have acute leukemia. And what happened next, Diego?
The Viviro stopped working.
When?
6 months ago.
Now, there are some other alternative dimensions. Every game has multiple endings, and all these side endings create branching dimensions, but they don't affect the timelines. However, I have some thoughts. Let's start with the original Far Cry one. I believe this game takes place in an alternate version of the main timeline, not the Nuke Timeline. Because it happens around 2020, that means it takes place between Far Cry 5 and Far Cry 6, implying that the timeline hasn't been destroyed yet. In this dimension, Jack Carver is not the Jackal, but a completely different person, since Far Cry 2 takes place in 2008, while Jack first appears around 2020. But what about Far Cry Instinct's evolution, which takes place a while after Far Cry Instincts? Well, if this game didn't happen, we would get the main timeline that we know. But if it did happen, we would get an alternate version of the main timeline. However, the duration of the 10 years in which Jack becomes the Jackal might be reduced, given that this game perhaps takes a long time within those 10 years. Then, moving on to Far Cry 4, if Ajay decides to sit and wait for Pagan, Pagan would make him his killing machine against the Golden Path.
Maybe now we can finally shoot some goddamn guns.
But surely Ajay would eventually face Amita or Sabal, who would tell him the truth about his father and what happened. As you know, Sabal is very persuasive and likely could convince Ajay to turn against Pagan. Also Yuma, who already saw Pagan as growing weak, would have turned against him eventually. As revealed in the Control DLC, it was Yuma who informed Mohan Ghale about the affair between Ishwari and Pagan.
She told Mohan of his wife's affair, didn't she?
As for the secret ending of Far Cry 5, I think no matter what happens, universe, the bomb would explode days or weeks later, and no one else would be sent to arrest Joseph, since world tensions reached their peak and no one cared about Joseph anymore. Maybe Joseph would actually achieve his goal by saving everyone, even his siblings, which would lead to another version of New Dawn. However, if his siblings survive, Jacob will kill him, as we mentioned earlier. Nevertheless, there's a possibility that he could survive with them, and in that case, the Highwaymen would likely face fierce resistance from an organized army. And regarding the walk-away ending, I think after killing his friends, the deputy would return to Hope County, maybe just moments later, and upon waking up, the bombs exploded, forcing him back to Hope County for shelter. And since he was close to Dutch's Island, he will return to his bunker, but he will also find Joseph there. As for the others, they will wake up from the drug and take shelter as well, and the same events of New Dawn will happen anyway. This was my attempt at gathering all the evidence, connecting the events together, and extracting the best possible explanation of these universes. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.